Queer knows about this track. This track is ridiculous. Shouts to Jack Frost. Anyway, this is a matchup list, right? This list, it was by KKKOG. I think it was actually a ton of players here that gave their opinion on the current state of matchups in the game. And it's not like tier lists where I think this character's strong or whatever, I think this character's weak or whatever. It's about matchups with people that have played the game for a while now to understand, like, okay, this is like almost month 1. What's going on with the current state of matchups, right? It is more valuable in getting a strategy of what you could do against certain characters in the cast. You would think of a certain strategy. Anything in red is stuff that is debatable between both characters, right? Anything in black is certain between both characters. Perfect example: Catalina, Gran. Gran believes that Catalina is a matchup in their favor, in Gran's favor, if they fight Catalina. But it's red, because if we were to go to Catalina, Catalina will actually think the matchup is even. So it's a difference in opinion as to what they think that matchup truly is. That's why it's red. But if it's certain, right, then let's say you have a character like Catalina and Charlotte, right? Charlotte believes, if you look at the Catalina line, Charlotte believes that it's a bad matchup for her, and Catalina believes it's a good matchup for her. So the consensus is clear, right? So if it's black, both people consider it to be that way for the matchup. If it's red, there's a difference in sentiment. Now, if it's circle, the matchup is advantageous. If it's an X, the matchup is disadvantageous. If it's a triangle, the matchup is even. And if it's a dash, then it's unknown. Now, when you want to look at this matchup chart that they've made, you look at the character matchups from the left down, right? And to the right, it will show what character matchup it is, and if the character matchup is even, advantageous, whatever. So, Gran, right? First of all, when I look at this matchup chart, immediately, the most glaring issues here, the characters that look like they have the most trouble so far is Zeta and Lowane. At least from the perspectives of the people that made this list. Look at the matchups for both of those characters. Just a ton of X's, bro. They're just not consistent overall across the board. Look at Zeta and the fact that she has some even or advantageous matchups, but the majority of them are all X's. So that immediately tells me that there's an issue with how they play the game and what they need to do to play the game. All things considered, this is early. I will tell you, for Lowane, most of his matchups are bad. His supers are good, but they're not the best in the sense that, like every other character, they get to convert into damage, right? Or they get something off of it, like Fairy, you know, like they get an install or a set play. Whereas Lowane gets these gimmicky ass supers, and he can't really utilize that bar that everyone gets. His strings aren't the best, anti-airs aren't the greatest. He suffers. Now, Charlotta, Lancelot, Catalina, Gran, those 4 characters either have very advantageous matchups across the board or even. There's like only 1 or 2 matchups that are really necessarily bad for them. Fairy is basically great against anyone who isn't top 4. Exactly. Exactly. Because if you look at the matchup spread, a majority of her matchups are either in her favor or even, except against the characters that also matter. So Lancelot, Charlotta, and Gran. And Catalina thinks that the matchup is even. Meanwhile, Fairy's like, the matchup is in my favor. Look at Ladiva. Like, the matchup spread for Ladiva is all like 5-5. Except for maybe 3 matchups. It's all like 5-5. It's wild to me. Metera went from being this top tier character to mid-low. What happened? Well, consider the 4 characters here that I mentioned that are really good. The meta is developing, right? What do you think is good in this game right now in terms of the meta? What is perceived as strong? If I touch you, you die. Can you see my mix-up? The ability to mix your opponent up with throw game. My normals are good. My mobility is good. Metera doesn't have bad mobility. Part of it is the 5D. She has what no other character has, and that's mobility in the air. To be able to move around in the air. With Metera, right? People are saying that she's low tier. I'm not saying any tier because obviously the game's only been out for a month. But with Metera, it's like she plays a different game. Her close standing C is 11 frames. She's not going to be able to get that from anything. She has to really land a butterfly trap to land that standing C to get the damage that she wants. And her damage output mid-screen is not the greatest, right? She has to land an anti-air for her to get like decent damage. And even then she's only dealing to you like 3.5k, 4k. In general, when you look at a character like Gran or Catalina, if you look at characters like them that touch you in the neutral and deal a crap ton of damage, it's pretty demoralizing, especially off of like an anti-air or something, right? And then they get Oki, and then they start to mix you up with throw. They have plus frames on a lot of their normals. Metera, she has plus frames, but she's not pressuring you like that. She's got to actually like take a commitment with 5D. She's mostly just zoning and then jailing you, right? That's mostly her game plan. And when she jails you, she's able to take her turn. That's why a lot of people are looking at Metera and be like, well, she's not as hot as she used to be. But she is still pretty hot. Point is, she's not as strong as people once thought. And that's one of the main reasons why. That's a more complicated reason. And then obviously the other reason is that we're figuring out what zoners do and how to avoid them now. Anybody could tell you, now more people know how to deal with zoning, how to dodge projectiles and get around these things so that way they're able to close the distance on you and stop you from being able to run that jail game. It's not that she's bad. I'm not trying to say that, but it's that she doesn't do enough damage. Her pressure isn't that great per se unless she has the ability to jail you. Everybody's starting to figure out how to deal with zoners. Those are the three main things why people are getting the idea that Metera isn't that great. Personally, I think the character's still pretty good. The character's still really good, but you're gonna have to work hard. She doesn't play the same game that, especially the four characters that I see that have the most matchups here. She doesn't play that game. She plays a completely different game. Looking at my character, she has some disadvantageous matchups. I could kind of agree with Catalina. If she gets a read on my 5D, she's hurting my life. And she can space me out. And she has her fireball that can stop me from doing a lot of different things. Her EX fireball is really good for that. And she has ways to just get in. Lancelot, I do think the matchup is kind of hard for Metera, but Lancelot players that the matchup isn't, in their favor. This far into the lifetime, is it still possible for a few or even a single talented player to discover a hidden potential of a character? I'll answer that question right now. Understand something, Honky Vampy. In a game like Super Smash Bros. Melee, for instance, right? It was best believed that a character like Yoshi was fucking low tier. And there was like 2 or 3 players. I think it was just one main player. I forget his name. But he was able to show that Yoshi was ridiculous in Super Smash Bros. Melee. So that character ended up climbing tier list in the community. Another good example is Hungrybox. Hungrybox is a very, very good example. And it's Jigglypuff, right? Jigglypuff was considered fucking low tier as fuck to the Melee community. It wasn't the same shared consensus. And then Hungrybox literally played the character, and the one character that gives Jigglypuff problems is Fox, right? But aside from that, because of how Hungrybox played so solid with that character, it was very clear that despite being the antithesis of the game, right? Despite being completely opposite to the fast movement that Melee provides, Puff is literally like top 5 in the game now. So, when you consider characters and potential, do not box yourself in with matchup charts, tier lists, etc. Because this is only based on what we know so far. I'm only looking at this to get an insight of the current metagame. I'm not looking at this as the be-all, end-all. And I think that's a lot of the misconception when people look at tier lists and matchup spread.